Hi, I'm Sharon Jordan, presenting my final project in AEP 855 Education Leadership. My topic of discussion will be minorities in education, the barriers in the elementary and secondary levels that carry over into adult learning. During my research phase, I read some interesting articles that presented facts and different perspectives. Some of these articles included race and equality, minority education in a comparative perspective, improving education for minorities, and the book called Other People's Children by Lisa. The commonalities among these articles and books discussed at great length were that minorities' youth were at a disadvantage when it came to education. Identifying what barriers are, the effects of these barriers, and the solutions differ greatly among educators, parents, the students themselves, and even the government. As an instructor with the Department of the Navy, I have encountered the results of problems and issues that occur during formal education. It is important to understanding the beginning of minorities' educational career in order to better serve them as an adult. I must admit that I was kind of surprised at all the controversy that surrounded minorities in education and the lack of cooperation among minority educators and non minority educators. Moving into the barriers that plague minorities in education, cultural and religious differences, social, economics disparities, discrimination by administrators, faculty, community, students, inequality of allocated resources in schools, lack of access, denied access to education, language and communication barriers, lack of motivation and support from parents and family, students being unprepared for formal schooling. Inequality of allocations and resources. Educational dollars and the lack of support by parents were the ones that I found most interesting. When secondary schools lack monetary and equipment resources, minorities suffer at a greater disadvantage as many of these students do not have access to technology and the internet. In a technology focused society, minorities will lack the knowledge and skills to acquire and retain entry level positions. From recent data, on average, low income areas receive almost 50% less dollars than middle class areas. Due to this variance in educational dollars, the low income areas receive less quality and inadequate education to prepare for future. Another problem that plagues the minority and education is some of the parents of minority children take a very passive or non existent role in their children's education. Teachers can only do so much to educate minorities without taking on the responsibilities of their parents. By breaking the cycle of abuse, and I do refer lack of parental involvement in education is a form of abuse. Students are at a disadvantage. It is a parent's responsibility to be engaged and a part in directing, encouraging, supporting, and mentoring their child. When the lack of support of educational programs and of education in minority homes, students most likely perform at lower levels or subsequently drop out. Let's look at some stats that I found kind of staggering that plagues minorities in education. have an average high school dropout rate of 50% collectively among minority groups, lower test scores, view education as non essential, or have a negative experience, higher parenthood rates, although these rates are starting to decline, there is still an epidemic of teenage parents. And most likely, most minorities feel they cannot relate to teachers and administrators. Which brings up an interesting fact when reading other people's children. Lisa Delvitt, a black educator, felt that black educators did not have a say in or input in making decisions regarding minorities, education, curriculums, and policies. I found that to be very interesting and surprisingly. 12% of whites, 14% of Asians, 21% of blacks, and 43% of Hispanics over the age of 25 years old do not possess a high school diploma. We have discussed barriers, the reason behind these barriers, and some of the issues facing education in minorities. Now, the question is, what is the solution? What can be done at a parent, a teacher, administrator, a community level to encourage our youth? So, we have discussed the barriers facing minorities in education. So, let's look at possible solutions moving forward in the right direction. As parents, we should become an active participant in our children or children's education career, starting in elementary. Promote and support school educational activities. Create a strong alliance and partnership with our child or children's teacher and school. These are some ways that we can encourage our children to become lifelong learners. As teachers, embrace the cultural differences of our minority students. Incorporate a curriculum that is cultural sensitive and culturally positive. For me, I remember in history class, the only thing we ever discussed was slavery. At being one of very few blacks in the school and only black in this class, I was always embarrassed, felt inadequate during these discussions. Create a strong alliance and partnership with our parents and students. As administrators, promote a cultural tolerance, embrace cultural diversity among students, recruit and encourage diversity on the faculty, staffing, who can relate to students and parents. As long as minorities lack the opportunities, skills, and an equal education, they will continue to be at a disadvantage as adult learners. Thank you.